The noon sun bore down on Dustville's square Arizona territory, 1879. Red dust hung thick in the air, kicked up by boots and restless feet, clinging to the smell of whiskey, sweat, and hunger for spectacle. A crowd of men pressed shoulder to shoulder around a makeshift wooden platform, faces glistening, eyes lit with the sharp gleam of cruelty waiting to be fed. On that platform stood Amara Johnson. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, dark skin glistening under the heat, shoulders thin but unbroken. Sweat traced the line of her cheek, yet her gaze stayed steady, cold, and unwavering as it cut through the crowd. No trace of cowardice, no tilt of the head in surrender. The auctioneer slammed his gavel against the wood, voice raised loud enough to mock. "Look here, folks. Dustville has no place for uppity Negroes. This woman dared to step into town, dared to argue with the sheriff, and even dared to hold her head high against the law of white men. Jail won't keep her, so the only way left is to sell her off to any fine gentleman willing to teach her her place." Whistles and laughter erupted. Men clapped and jeered. A miner with a filthy beard bellowed, "$20! I'll have her scrub my stables." Another cut in, his eyes slick with lewd intent. "$30. What's a bit of color? She'll learn quick enough under me." The crowd broke into coarse laughter, the stench of contempt tightening around the square. But on the platform, Amara did not lower her gaze. Her chin lifted higher, pride carved sharp across her face. Every glance she cast was like the edge of a blade, slicing through the men who dared to laugh. A few shifted, uneasy, as though they'd been caught bare under her fire. If not for the rope biting her wrists, one could have mistaken her for a warrior taken prisoner straight from battle. The auctioneer raised his gavel again. $30 once, 30 twice. Gentlemen, don't let this prize slip through your fingers." Then it came, a voice cutting clean through the heat and noise, low and iron hard. $100. The roar of the crowd faltered into silence. Heads snapped toward the sound. From the shadow of the saloon's porch, a tall figure stepped forward. His shirt was plain cotton, his jeans worn thin, his boots crusted with trail dust. Tawny hair caught the sunlight in a disheveled blaze, while his face, angular, carved by weather and grit, stayed hard as stone. His eyes, steel gray with a hint of blue, scanned the square like cold fire. It was Caleb Morgan, master of the Triple M Ranch, a name carried across the territory with equal parts fear and respect. Known for a draw faster than most men could blink, and a temper that bent to no one, his presence shifted the air in Dustville like a storm rolling in from the mesas. The auctioneer stammered, his voice breaking under strain. "Mr. Morgan, surely you jest. This ain't a horse nor a patch of land. I don't jest." Caleb's reply cut sharp, final. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, anger simmering under disbelief. A heavy-set saloon keeper, notorious for cruelty, barked out in defiance, $110. Caleb's face did not flicker. He stepped further into the open, each strike of his boots thudding like hammer blows against the packed earth. He pulled off his wide-brimmed hat, the sun glinting across eyes that cut like a drawn blade. $200. This ends now. Silence spread like a chokehold. No one breathed. Never in Dustville had a man laid down that kind of money for a black woman. Those who'd been eager with their bids sank back, swallowed hard, and turned their faces away from Caleb's gaze. The gavel struck, and the square seemed to lose its breath. $200 hung in the air like a noose, heavy enough to choke off whistles and jeers alike. Drunken faces froze in disbelief, mouths agape, eyes darting as if hoping the sound had been some cruel trick of the ear. Amara remained on the platform, wrists raw and swollen where rope had bitten deep. Her heart hammered, yet her face betrayed nothing. She knew the sting of scorn, the weight of stares sharpened to knives. But this baffled her. A white man had just thrown down the price of a herd of horses for her. The sheriff narrowed his eyes at Caleb, a half-smile curling in mockery. "Morgan, I don't catch your meaning. $200 for a colored woman? You fixin' to make a fool of yourself before all Dustvale?" Caleb spared him no glance. From the inside pocket of his coat, he pulled a thick stack of bills. Calmly, without haste, he counted them out and laid them flat on the rough plank. The worn paper whispered against itself, each crisp fold loud in the silence. His fingers, sun-browned and sinewed, moved with a finality that left no room for doubt. "I'm not buying a joke," he said, voice low and edged with iron. "I'm paying for her freedom." The murmur that rose was uneasy, like wind before a storm. Somewhere a man muttered, "Freedom? Not in this town." But when Caleb's gaze swept over them, cold, clear, and cutting, no one dared let their words grow louder. Amara caught every syllable. Her lips trembled, though she held her head steady. Freedom. A stranger, stern-faced and silent, speaking such a word on her behalf. It could as well be another kind of snare, finer woven than rope. The auctioneer cleared his throat, eager to close the matter. "Well then, money's here. Done and settled." He jerked his chin toward the sheriff. "Untie her." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but orders were orders. He stepped up, yanked the rope loose. Fibers scraped against Amara's skin, leaving angry welts as they fell away. She winced, but did not flinch. And then came the moment. Caleb stepped forward, stopping at the foot of the platform. He looked up at her, eyes steady as stone, and extended his hand. A working man's hand, broad, scarred, hardened by sun and years of labor, opened wide, offering strength without words. The crowd hushed, waiting. Would the proud black woman place her hand in his, or would she spurn him outright? Amara's gaze fell on that hand. Calloused fingers, knuckles rough and blunt, not the soft grip of idle men. Her chest tightened. Like an animal cornered too long, she mistrusted kindness, mistrusted every shape it took. She narrowed her eyes, lifted her chin higher. "You think I need your help to step down?" she asked, voice small but sharp enough to pierce the ears straining for sound. Caleb said nothing. His hand stayed there, unwavering, unhurried. His eyes betrayed no mockery, no hunger, only a grim steadiness. Amara's fists clenched at her sides. She drew in a breath, made her choice. She did not take his hand. Instead, she turned from it, set her worn shoes upon the steps, and came down on her own. Dust rose around her ankles as she touched ground. Her frame was slight, but her stance unshaken, unyielding as if her every step declared she would not bend. The crowd sneered. Laughter, whistles, crude remarks cracked the silence. Yet as she passed Caleb, she felt the weight of his eyes following. He did not snatch his hand away. He let it linger in the air a heartbeat longer before tucking it back into his coat. Her pride and his silence collided, ringing out in the square, louder than the mockery behind them. Amara walked fast, back straight, each step a refusal to be diminished. But her heart thudded wild, tangled between fear and fury, disbelief and something she could not yet name. Caleb's boots fell in behind her, his stride long enough to bring him level with ease. His broad shoulders shielded her from lingering stares, and without a word, his nearness alone kept the crowd at bay. None dared stand in their path. She glanced sideways, catching his profile in the sinking sun. The lines of his face were harsh, jaw set, mouth clamped tight. His eyes were fixed ahead, unreadable. A man like this, why would he throw down $200 for her? Suspicion gnawed at her, and yet, beneath its bite, a fragile sprout stirred, thin, uncertain, but alive. Curiosity. Dust rose thick around Amara's boots as she walked, each step grinding heat and grit into her skin, slick with sweat. Behind her, whistles and jeers still rang, cruel needles pricking at her neck. Dustvale had never been so alive with curiosity. Every eye followed her. The black woman just bought for $200, daring to stride away beside Caleb Morgan, the man this territory knew as untamed as the desert itself. She moved quick, keeping a space between them, as if the smallest brush of his sleeve might bind her anew. Her shoulders stayed taut, ready to bolt at the snap of a twig. From doorways and saloon porches came stares sharp as rifle sights, sneers curling in shadows. She knew well enough. Leaving the platform did not mean escaping the chains woven tight through her very skin. Caleb's stride matched hers, steady and unhurried. His hand rested lightly on the butt of the revolver at his hip. Not boastful, not threatening, only present. Enough to make men who'd thought to stir trouble think twice and swallow back their bile. His eyes, pale steel under the brim of his hat, stayed locked on the road ahead, as if the whole world had narrowed to the red-dusted path leading out of town. A boy sitting on the market steps shouted after them, "Get out!" Laughter cracked from the crowd like a whip. Amara's hands balled, nails digging deep into her palms until pain lit up her nerves. She longed to turn, to scorch that boy with the fire in her eyes, to show them she would never cower. But Caleb's broad back blocked most of their gaze. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, only walked on. His silence wrapped around her like a shield sturdier than words. At the edge of Dustville, where cabins thinned into scrubland and brittle grass, Caleb finally spoke. His voice was low, gravelly, sure. "You won't set foot in that place again." Amara startled, her eyes snapping toward him, suspicion sharp in their dark depths. "And what's that mean? From one auction block to another?" He stopped then, turned to face her. Sunlight cut harsh across the planes of his face, but his eyes burned bright, unwavering. "I don't want a slave. I don't want a servant. I won't stand by while a human being gets sold like cattle in front of me." Her lips pressed tight. His words rang plain, but to her, who had heard promises crumble like dry leaves, truth and falsehood sounded the same. She tilted her head, searching his eyes for the hunger or pity she'd come to expect. But neither was there. Only a hardness, the kind born of storms weathered, the kind that did not bend. "So what do you mean to do with me?" Her voice came cold, though a tremor slipped beneath it. Caleb took the reins of the horse tied nearby, resting his hand on its mane. "I'll take you somewhere safe. When you're ready to go, you'll go. No one will stop you." A hot wind swept through, tugging at Amara's dress, rattling dry grass along the ditch. Her lips twitched, near to laughter, but not the kind of laughter that freed the soul. Never in her life had anyone told her she had leave to walk away. Never had anyone suggested she might choose. For a heartbeat, her eyes faltered. Suspicion clung, anger clung, but a thin crack split the ice inside her. Her steps slowed. No longer a flight from shame, but something quieter, unsteady. The space between them narrowed until she caught the heavy breath of the horse, until the heat rolling from his shoulder brushed faint across her skin. The road snaked out of Dustville, winding into pale scrub and hard-packed earth. With each step, the clamor behind them softened until it was nothing but memory. The sneers and slurs faded, leaving only wind through grass and the steady beat of hooves. Amara glanced sideways. Caleb walked straight, eyes fixed on the horizon, his posture tall and unbending. There was something strange in it. A man who needed no loud words, no show of fists, whose very presence was warning enough. For the first time since the rope had bitten her wrists, Amara's chest eased. Not peace, not yet. Not trust. But a thread had been strung, thin as spider silk, tying her fate to the stranger who had cut her from the block. A beginning, fragile but real. Evening fell slow along the trail leading out of Dustville. The sky burned red, streaked with clouds smeared like ash across the horizon. Caleb reined in at a clearing where stones jutted in a rough circle, grass brittle and whispering in the wind. "We'll camp here," he said, plain and short. Amara gave no reply. Her hand clutched the small bundle she carried, little more than a scarf and scraps she'd managed to keep. Her dark eyes swept the edges of the clearing, measuring each way out, like a creature long taught to expect snares in every shadow. Caleb unsaddled the horse, set tack aside and bent to build a fire. His calloused hands stacked brush and struck flint. Sparks leapt, caught on dry grass, and soon a flame rose, bright and steady against the gathering dark. Its light carved hard lines into his face, deepening the plains of a man weathered by dust and years. From a sack he drew dried beans and a strip of smoked pork. Without comment, he set a blackened pot over the fire, poured water, and dropped in meat and beans. The scent crept into the night, savory and rich, mingling with smoke until the barren patch of earth seemed to soften with warmth. Amara sat apart, her back against stone. She kept her gaze from the fire, watching instead from its edge. Her hand rested near the hilt of a small knife at her belt, the one thing she trusted to defend herself. Every motion of his she tracked, turning the pot, testing the boil, shifting a log. None of it threatened her, yet her body stayed taut as drawn wire. When the beans began to bubble thick, Caleb ladled out 2 tin bowls. He set one on a flat stone midway between them. "Eat. The road's long." She didn't move. The bowl steamed, the smell sharp in her nostrils. Hunger gnawed. She'd had nothing since morning but a sip of water. But pride and caution pinned her still. Her fingers lingered on the knife. Caleb pressed no further. He drew his own bowl close, ate slow, eyes on the flames. Firelight flickered in his gray-blue gaze, steady, unreadable. Not the hungry eyes of Dustville, not the sneer of ownership. Simply there, quiet as stone. That quietness unsettled her more than taunts ever had. At last she reached forward, dragging the bowl near. The knife stayed at her side, a silent warning. She lifted a spoonful, tasted. Beans soft, pork smoky, salt clinging to her tongue. Warmth spread through her belly, small but insistent, a flame chasing back the desert chill. He said nothing, only added wood when the fire dipped. When they'd nearly finished, he pulled a tin cup from his pack, poured black coffee from a dented flask, and set it down within her reach. He didn't look at her, didn't speak. Then he leaned back against his saddle, giving space that felt deliberate. Amara hesitated. A small thing, that gesture, but clear. He meant not to crowd her, not to breach the walls she clung to. She wrapped her fingers around the cup. Steam curled upward, bitter and sharp. It struck some memory of Boston nights, when she'd pressed her nose to cafe windows, aching for the taste of an ordinary life. She sipped. The heat bit her tongue, then settled, heavy and grounding. She let out a breath she hadn't known she held. Her gaze lifted, caught his. For an instant, brief, unguarded, neither looked away. No mockery there, no pity. Only calm, as if he saw her without trying to define her. For the first time since the rope had been cut, she did not turn her head aside. Night gathered whole. The desert wind cooled, tugging at their clothes. Fire threw their shadows high across the stones, one tall, broad, unyielding, one slight, proud, unbroken. In the hush between crackle and breath, distance still lay, caution still bristled. But somewhere in that space, the first crack formed in the wall around Amara's heart. Dawn crept slow across the rim of the mountains, painting their edges in pale gold. Amara woke to the smell of coffee rising in the chill air. Caleb was already up, broad shoulders veiled in a thin sheen of morning mist as he sat by the dying fire. He poured a cup, set it near her without a word. She gave a small nod in thanks. Silence lingered between them, not as heavy as the night before, though her guard stayed high. The knife tucked beneath her skirts still rested sharp in her mind, her hand never forgetting where it lay. After a hasty breakfast, Caleb cinched the saddle tight. His voice broke the quiet, steady as gravel underfoot. "You're good with numbers, aren't you?" Amara stilled, eyes narrowing. "And where did you hear that?" "Last night, when you spoke of the work you've done along the road." His tone carried no edge. "I need someone like that at Triple M. The ranch is wide, the book's a tangle. I can't keep them straight on my own. If you'll take it, I'll pay fair. You'll have a cabin of your own. No one will force you into skirts. And you can leave when you choose." A soft, disbelieving laugh slipped from her. "1 month. No longer. I won't wear new chains, no matter how polished." Caleb nodded. No quarrel in him. 1 month. If it doesn't suit, I'll see you safe to another town. 2 days later, the valley opened wide to the sprawl of Triple M. From the crest of the ridge, Amara saw it laid out. Long fences stretching toward the horizon, black and white cattle drifting like dark clouds across the fields. A stout pine house rising firm in the center of barns and corrals. Smoke curled straight from the chimney. The air carried the mingled tang of hay, leather, and sun. She narrowed her eyes. This was no small spread. That such a man would hand over his ledgers to a black woman, a stranger. It drew a wry, cautious laugh from her throat. When they rode into the yard, ranch hands lifted their heads from chores. Broad men with rope-burned palms and grass-stained shirts paused, eyes narrowing at the woman beside their boss. Silence gathered sharp, stretched taut like a blade across the yard. One heavy-shouldered man cleared his throat. "Boss, who's this?" Suspicion edged his words. Caleb swung down from the saddle, voice curt, unshaken. This is Amara Johnson. From this day, she keeps the books for Triple M. Faces froze. Murmurs rippled low. A few laughs cut bitter through the air. A woman, and black at that, trusted with the books? It bucked every order they'd known. Amara held her spine tall, her black gaze sweeping over them like a drawn whip. Pride lifted her chin as it had on the auction block in Dustville. Still, her pulse thudded hard. Every stare felt like a nail driven into her skin. Then Caleb moved closer, taking his place at her side. His hand came down upon her back, firm, steady, but gentle. A simple gesture, yet clear as a gunshot. A silent claim that she belonged here, and his words stood as guard. The warmth of that touch pressed through cloth and into her, startling her more than she let show. She shifted back a fraction, but his eyes, stern and even, held no hint of scorn. She could not turn from them. His voice carried across the yard, flint-struck. Any man who takes issue with my decision can be gone by sundown. I won't keep them. No one moved. Eyes dropped. Whispers died. Only then did he lift his hand from her back, turning to name them one by one. Hank, Pedro, Joey, Old Bill, and Wong, the Chinese cook whose smile softened the air. Amara inclined her head to each, her manner measured. Yet in her chest, the echo of his hand lingered, not a claim, but a shield. By afternoon, Caleb led her to a small cabin on the edge of the ranch. One room, a stove, a sturdy table, a narrow bed neatly made. Not grand, but clean. This belonged to the old foreman, he said. It's yours now. If you need more, say so. Amara laid her palm on the scarred table, tracing grooves cut by knives long gone. A voice inside whispered it was just another trap, another chain disguised in wood and firelight. Yet when she looked up, Caleb only waited, patient, unpressing. She nodded once. I'll try for a month. A rare smile flickered across his worn face, softening it. Then Triple M has its new bookkeeper. The first days at Triple M were no easy matter for Amara. From the very first meal shared with the ranch hands, she felt the weight of an invisible wall. Glances flicked her way and skittered off. Words came clipped, and coughs rang false when she stepped into the dining hall. A black woman at their table, and keeper of the ranch's books, no less, cut sharp against the order these men had lived by. Amara held her back straight, her black eyes steady as they met every look. She ate little, spoke less, and watched much. Suspicion was nothing new to her. What unsettled her was how Caleb refused to let the wall stand. At that same table, he made it plain to draw her into the talk. Amara found that the hay bill last month was written down twice, he said one evening. We nearly lost $50 on that mistake. The room fell still. Broad men who knew ropes, hooves, and sweat better than ink or numbers shifted in their chairs, left blinking at the ground. Amara's days settled into the small office beside the main house. She gathered stacks of dust-worn ledgers, turned pages scribbled with half-legible scrawl, numbers wandering like cattle in open range. With a pencil and her own small notebook, she began to tame them. Columns for costs, columns for wages, feed, salt, oats. Caleb rarely came by in the heat of day. His place was in the fields, in the saddle, along fence lines or driving cattle to water. But each evening, as sunlight slanted low through the window, his boots would sound at the threshold. What's new today? His voice would ask, quiet and gravelly. Amara never looked up at once. She'd slide the book across, her slender finger tapping a crooked line. Here. Whoever kept these numbers added sacks of salt to bushels of oats, off by near 100 weight. If you'd gone by this, you'd have paid wages on goods that never existed. Caleb leaned a hand on the chair, brows drawn. He wasn't schooled in figures, but he knew the cost of a keen eye. And by your measure, what's the loss? Her answer came crisp, sure. $30. Not much, maybe, but $30 is half a month's wages to a man here. Caleb studied her longer than needed. The last light struck her eyes, glinting dark and alive. In them, he saw more than numbers. There was pride, the quiet pride of someone long forced to prove her worth just to be heard. Bit by bit, the hands of Triple M began to shift their stance. They still held caution, but when Amara showed them how to stretch feed, or when to time salt deliveries to cut down on waste, they listened. One afternoon, Hank, the old foreman known for sternness, brought her a bundle of notes. "Take a look, Miss Johnson," he muttered, scratching his head. "I reckon I tallied this wrong. My eyes aren't what they used to be." Amara nodded without comment, marked the slip, and laid it plain. Hank gave a short chuckle, the first sound of ease between them. That night he called her Miss instead of that woman. Evenings Caleb kept to his habit. At first he leaned in the doorway, arms folded, watching her pencil scratch across the page. Later he pulled a chair, sitting close enough to hear her explain columns and sums. Sometimes, when she bent low to point at a figure, the soft curl of her hair brushed his sleeve. Caleb stayed still, though something inside him shifted, like a tether pulled taut. Night after night, when the ledgers closed and lamplight waned, Amara found Caleb's steps behind her as she crossed the yard. Not the steps of a warden, but of a man unwilling to let her walk alone through the ring of half-mocking laughter by the bunkhouse. He carried a lantern, the flame steady against the wind. "The path's dark. Take it," he said one night, holding it out. Her fingers brushed his as she took it. Firelight struck his eyes, stern still, yet softened at the edges. She gave a small nod, turned toward her cabin. Her heart beat faster than it had all day, faster even than when she'd caught a mistake of $30 in a stranger's hand. Night slipped down over the valley like a dark silk cloth. Crickets rasped beyond the rail fence. The last coals in the yard glowed faint, scattering sparks into the dusk. Amara sat on the porch of her cabin, both hands cupped around a tin mug still holding the ghost of coffee's warmth. The wind carried scents of hay and smoke, salted with a calm she'd never known. Caleb's steps came behind her, heavy but even. He lowered himself onto the step beside her, setting his own cup on the ground. Neither spoke. Silence lay between them, filled only by the soft clink of a horse shifting in the shadows. Amara tipped her head back to the sky. Stars spilled bright, sharp as grains of salt scattered on black velvet. After a long while, she gave a short, dry laugh. Boston never had a sky like this. Only chimney smoke, crowded streets, and eyes that cut sharper than knives. Caleb turned his head, listening, but said nothing. "There," she went on, voice lowering. "A black woman, no matter how well she read or how hard she worked, was nothing but a shadow. Paid less, called names fit for dirt. I grew up inside their scorn, inside whispers that I would never be enough. Then Dustville came, and they tried to sell me like stock at market. Her grip tightened around the mug. Shoulders shook once, though her eyes stayed lifted, proud, defiant to the last. Caleb's gaze drifted to the ridges silvered under moonlight. At length he spoke, slow and certain. Here, you're no stock, no shadow. Here you're yourself. Amara turned to him. Starlight caught in her dark eyes, glimmering. Plain words, stripped of frill, but they struck a place inside her she'd kept bound tight, wounds long hidden behind armor. She gave a small, startled laugh as if mocking herself for letting it reach her. You make it sound easy, but the world doesn't shift because of a few words. Caleb's shoulders lifted once, his voice firm. Let the world be. At Triple M what I say stands. Silence stretched, thick with more than night air. Amara's chest warmed, not from coffee but from the weight of his certainty. For the first time since stepping onto this land, she felt the faint stir of belonging. Caleb moved then, slow as if wary of breaking glass. His hand, broad, calloused, settled lightly across hers where it clenched the cup. No pressure, no demand, only presence. I'm here. Amara flinched, ready to pull back. But when her eyes met his, stern, stripped of deceit, she stilled. For a long breath, their gazes locked. She read loss in him, deep as her own, and respect that needed no tongue. Her fingers slackened. The mug slipped, rolled with a dull clang against the step. She did not bend for it. Her hand remained beneath his. Caleb's breath mingled with the night, warm against the cool air. He bent, slow and measured, as though the moment were too fragile for haste. His lips brushed hers, a touch fleeting. Her body tensed, heart hammering. Then, like dry timber meeting flame, she leaned into him, giving what trust remained. The kiss deepened, hunger breaking through restraint, fierce with years of silence and denial. Heat surged in Amara, cracking the ice she had worn like armor. Caleb drew her closer, arms firm, protective but never crushing. Amara trembled, her palm finding his chest. Beneath it, his heartbeat thundered strong and steady, syncing with her own. They lowered together onto the wooden porch, breath tangled, stars wheeling above. The desert night bit cold, but between them rose warmth fierce as fire. No vows spoken, no bonds sworn, only the truth that after loss and doubt, they had found each other. Rumors ran faster than hooves. Barely a week after Amara had taken up her work at Triple M, Dustville carried a new whisper. Folks said the black woman keeping Caleb Morgan's books was no bookkeeper at all, but a runaway slave with papers to prove it. The man fanning the fire was Richard Thornton, the saloon keeper with a taste for cruelty, the same one who had stood at the auction block that day. He spun his tale to any ear willing to listen, swearing he had seen the bill of sale himself, swearing Amara belonged to a planter in Georgia, and swearing Caleb Morgan was harboring a fugitive. In days, the stares around Dustville soured. Where neighbors had once nodded polite, now they turned away, or let a sneer follow her back. Children stopped their play to gape. Even women who had taken bread from her hands pursed lips and walked on. Amara held her back straight, chin high as she crossed the street, but beneath her shawl her palms sweated. Every look of contempt was a needle pressing in. She had borne it before, but this time the weight struck different. She was not alone anymore. Caleb walked beside her, stride steady, eyes fixed forward. The hiss of runaway rose sharp enough for both to hear. Amara wanted to turn back, to vanish, but Caleb halted mid-step. He turned to her, steel-gray gaze calm. Then, without a word, he reached and caught her hand. The act cracked like thunder through the square. All of Dustville seemed to hold its breath. A white man, master of one of the valley's great ranches, dared to clasp the hand of a black woman, one branded as a slave in rumor. Amara froze. Her heart pounded wild, torn between shame, terror, and a rush of heat at his touch. She made to pull away, but Caleb's grip only tightened, steady as iron. "Walk," he said, voice low yet carrying. Enough for her to hear, enough for the town to know he meant it. They moved on together, eyes bored into their backs, voices buzzed like hornets. But Caleb never bowed his head. His silence was a gauntlet flung. Any man who opposed him could step forward. Back at the ranch, Amara tore her hand free as though burned. "You're mad," she whispered, voice trembling. "Do you know what they'll say? They'll turn against you, against Triple M." Caleb set his hat on the table, eyes steady. "Let them say it. I don't live by their thinking." She laughed bitter, sharp. "You don't understand. To them, I am excuse enough. For exile, for chains, for the rope. One rumor can end me." He stepped closer. She edged back, but he stopped with space between. His voice lowered, firm. "Amara, I saw you on that platform, proud when all of Dustville would have ground you under. I will not allow anyone, even you, to name that truth as anything less. Triple M stands with you, and I—" He paused, the weight of it plain. "I stand with you." Their eyes met. She felt herself split down the middle, one half aching to believe, to rest in the warmth of his words, the other half crying out that belief only breeds wounds deeper still. She turned away, lashes low to hide the shine in her gaze. Yet when his hand settled light upon her shoulder, not to bind, only to bear witness that she was not alone, she did not draw back. The rumors did not die, but cracks showed in them. A few merchants, men who had once profited from her keen eye, quietly vouched for her honesty. Some of the ranch hands, once wary, now nodded respect when they saw her labor bent over the ledgers. But Richard Thornton was not done. He knew the moment Caleb's hand closed over Amara's in the open square, the matter had outgrown rumor. It was a challenge, bold as any duel. And Thornton, a man who had built his life on deceit and threat, would not let a challenge pass unanswered. The noon sun baked the dust over Dustvale's main street, and heat shimmered above the crowd that jammed the square outside the sheriff's office. It seemed the whole town had gathered, faces flushed, eyes sharp for spectacle. In the center stood Richard Thornton, smug in his dark velvet vest that gleamed under the light. In his hand he brandished a bundle of yellowed papers like a prize. "Here," he bellowed, his voice thick with feigned outrage. "Straight from Boston. It names her plain. Amara Johnson, runaway slave. Reported missing since 1877. And worse, these records claim she's unstable, dangerous to decent folk." The crowd erupted, a swell of whispers and gasps, suspicions spreading like wildfire. Eyes turned on Amara, hard, scornful, eager to believe. She stood beside Caleb, spine stiff though her eyes shimmered wet. Thornton's words struck like knives, cutting into scars she thought buried deep. Sheriff Daniels, heavy-bellied with a tangle of whiskers, frowned as he took the papers. He thumbed through them, lips pursed. These seals, they look real enough. If this is true, the law obliges me. What law? Caleb's voice cut through, thunderous. The square stilled. What law still sells human beings like cattle? Slavery's been gone more than a decade, Daniels. Amara belongs to no one but herself. Thornton sneered, waving the papers high. Words on the page don't lie. A runaway from a madhouse pretending to keep ledgers. You'd hand your ranch, your coin, your very livelihood to a lunatic? Laughter and jeers rippled this time, louder, crueler. Amara bent her head, tears breaking free and falling into the dust. She clenched her fists, fighting the tremor in her limbs. Fear rose sharp in her throat. Fear that no matter how far she ran, chains would follow. Caleb stepped forward, placing himself squarely before her. He leaned close enough for her alone to hear. Raise your head, Amara. There's no shame here. She lifted her gaze and his steel-gray eyes held hers, unyielding, unashamed. In them she saw not pity, but promise. Turning, Caleb faced the crowd. Thornton's got papers. I've got truth. Every man at Triple M knows. Without Amara's eye, we'd have bled hundreds of dollars to sloppy books. She's no madwoman. She's the one who saved this ranch. Truth! A voice called. Hank, the bent-backed foreman, stepped out, finger pointing at Amara. She caught mistakes I missed. If she's crazy, then I'm blind as a mule. Pedro, the Mexican cowboy, joined him. She showed us how to stretch feed for the horses, saved us near double the cost. To me, Amara is part of Triple M. Voices rose. Triple M's own, someone shouted, and soon the chant spread, echoing across the square. Amara stood still, chest tight. Each word thrown in her defense struck like anchors, dragging her up from the depths of despair. Thornton's face flushed red, his snarl twisting. Fools, all of you. She's tricked you. These papers are the only truth. Caleb strode closer, voice cutting like steel. Paper can be forged, but truth cannot. I'll ride to Boston myself, tear out every record if I must. But right here, right now, hear me plain. Amara Johnson is no slave, no lunatic. She's my bookkeeper. She's of Triple M. Any hand raised against her is raised against me. Silence dropped heavy. The crowd murmured, uneasy but unmoving. Sheriff Daniels stared at the papers, then snapped them closed. Until I have proof straight from Boston, I can't hold her. Thornton, you've stirred up enough. Thornton roared protest, but no one heeded him. The tide had turned. The voices of Triple M's men had cowed the square. That evening, as they rode back toward the ranch, Amara walked at Caleb's side, her hand trembling still. He said nothing, only reached for her hand and held it, firm and steady. Not for a moment, not for show, but through the whole long road home. This time, Amara did not pull away. For the first time, she felt what it meant to belong, not through purchase, not through pity, but by the choice of a community that stood beside her. Nights at Triple M usually passed in peace. The desert wind whispered through the fences, cattle lowed soft from the pens, and lanterns burned dim along the paths. But that night, the air felt heavy, close, as though carrying the weight of storm. Amara sat in her cabin, the lantern throwing gold across the open ledger. Her finger traced a line of numbers, recalculating the cost of salt. The silence pressed thick enough that she heard her own heartbeat. Her eyelids drooped, but she forced herself steady. She had known long nights before, yet never a darkness that seemed to wait and watch. A faint scrape sounded at the door. She frowned, head lifting. Before she could rise, the door burst wide. 3 shadows surged inside, faces masked, steel flashing in their fists. "Take her!" one barked, voice harsh and raw. Amara lunged back, hand catching the small knife from the table. But a rough grip seized her shoulder, wrenching her toward the open night. She twisted, shouting loud enough to tear the stillness. A gunshot cracked across the yard. Hooves thundered, voices roared. "Triple M!" Caleb led the charge, Winchester blazing. His first shot dropped a man at the threshold, muzzle flash lighting eyes fierce with fury. The other 2 dragged Amara toward the yard, her feet scraping over gravel. Pedro fired. Hank shouted orders, bullets sparking against the barn wall. One shot whistled past Amara's ear, close enough to sting her cheek with heat. She fought like a cornered cat, driving the knife into the arm that bound her. The blade cut deep. Blood spattered, the man cursed, clutching her harder. Then Caleb was there. He flung himself at them, too close for the rifle. His fist struck hard against the attacker's jaw. The man toppled, dragging Amara down with him. She hit the dirt, breath crushed from her chest. The last one leveled a pistol at her. For an instant, all stilled. Moonlight, dust, the cold eye of the barrel. A shot cracked. The man pitched forward, dead before he struck ground. Hank lowered his revolver, smoke curling from its mouth. Silence fell in ragged gasps. The cattle bawled wild in the pen. Men panted in the dark. The acrid smell of powder hung sharp in the air. Amara lay on the earth, chest heaving, knife fallen from her hand. She looked up and Caleb was there, kneeling, pulling her into his arms. "You're safe," he whispered, voice rough, breaking as though he had nearly lost her. She buried her face against his chest, breathing in the sweat and smoke, the solid warmth of him. Fear still clung sharp, but within his hold it eased, if only by a breath. The ranch hands closed around them, eyes bright with anger. Pedro spat into the dust, cursing Thornton's name. Hank wiped his brow, voice hoarse. "He's gone too far. From lies to murder, that's war." Caleb rose, still holding Amara. His eyes swept the men hard as iron. "From this night, no man at Triple M lets his guard down. Thornton wants war, he'll have it. But first, guard her. She's the heart of this ranch." Every gaze turned toward Amara. No doubt remained, only resolve and respect. Later, when the yard grew quiet, Amara sat on the bed in her cabin, still trembling. She saw again the masked hands, the pistol aimed, the pull of fear dragging her down. Yet stronger than the memory was the moment Caleb's arms closed around her, the sound of his voice naming her the heart of Triple M. For the first time, she felt safe within a nightmare, and for the first time, she no longer wished to run. A week after the failed attack, Dustville held its breath in tension. Thornton still swaggered through his saloon, coins slipping from his fingers to buy whispers, to keep his lies alive. But he did not see how the pieces, gathered in silence, had begun to form a picture he could not deny. The first sign came from the westward stage road. A sealed letter, placed directly into Amara's hands, bore the postmark of San Francisco. On the envelope was a hand she knew at once, so familiar her eyes blurred. Robert Johnson, her uncle who had left Boston years ago. Inside, his words rang firm. He had heard the rumors out of Dustville and would not remain silent. He swore Amara was his niece, born free, never bound by chains. Enclosed were her birth record and the church ledger. seals clear and undeniable. "You are the pride of the Johnson family," he wrote. "Stand tall. No one has the right to call you slave." Tears slid down Amara's cheeks as she read. For the first time in months, she held proof stronger than Thornton's forgeries. Yet beyond the paper, it was the voice of her kin, the blood that Thornton could never fabricate, that gave her strength. Meanwhile, Hank and Pedro, with a handful of loyal ranch hands, had been quietly digging. They gathered scraps of evidence: trade letters, smudged records, the sworn word of a saloon girl unpaid for months. Together they painted a dark truth. Thornton had a hand in a trafficking ring through Kansas, using his saloon as a front for human trade. Sheriff Daniels, seated in his worn wooden office, received the packet from Hank. His heart thudded as he read. For the first time, he saw it clear. Thornton was no mere braggart, but a criminal. The day of reckoning filled the square once more. Thornton stood, loud and smug, waving his slave papers as though they were gospel. But Sheriff Daniels raised his hand, calling for silence. "Richard Thornton," his voice rang, "the documents you brought have been examined. The seals are false, the signatures forged, and—" he lifted another packet of papers from his case. "There is evidence linking you to the trafficking of human lives through Kansas. Your accusations against Amara Johnson are lies." The crowd rippled in shock. Faces once quick to believe turned on Thornton, their stares no longer eager but sharp with doubt. Daniels turned, holding up the sealed letter. "Further, we have confirmation from Robert Johnson, Amara's own uncle, along with a lawful birth record. She is a free citizen. All charges, all slanders, are dismissed." Cheers rose. Pedro thrust his fist high, shouting, "Triple M stands free!" The ranch hands echoed, their voices rolling like thunder across the square. Thornton stammered, face crimson. "All lies, fabrications, they've set me up." The sheriff shook his head, the butt of his revolver cracking against the boards. "On the contrary, it is you under arrest. From this day, Richard Thornton will stand to answer charges of trafficking and forgery." Two deputies moved in, snapping irons on his wrists. Thornton thrashed, cursed, but the jeers of the crowd drowned him. For the first time, his strut collapsed, leaving only a pitiful figure dragged through the dust. Amara stood still in the square, tears shining, yet her lips curved in a smile. No longer did she have to bear the weight of sidelong stares. Instead, townsfolk came forward, nodding, even murmuring apologies. One woman pressed a basket of bread into her hands. "We were wrong," she whispered. Caleb stood close, his broad hand warm against her back. When Amara lifted her gaze to his, he gave her one of his rare smiles, steady and sure. "I told you," he murmured, voice low for her alone. "Truth cannot be twisted forever." A laugh broke through her tears, her shoulders loosening as though a stone had fallen away. For the first time, Dustville no longer felt like a place set to crush her. It felt like a place where she might breathe, where she might live. Sunset on the prairie came like a kind of miracle. The whole sky above Dustville burned in streaks of orange, red, and violet, as though someone had tipped a giant goblet of wine across the horizon. Amara sat on the wooden fence, eyes following the cattle as they drifted back toward the pens. In her chest, a question churned without rest. Should she continue toward San Francisco, where her uncle's letter promised another kind of life, or remain here at the ranch, a place that had already changed everything? Since the truth had been laid bare, she no longer had to walk with her head ducked. The townsfolk greeted her with nods, even smiles. The ranch hands treated her as one of their own. Yet somewhere deep inside, Boston still whispered. The flight, the years of scorn, the memory of being paraded for sale, they all repeated the same warning. Never cling too tight. Freedom meant being ready to leave. Footsteps drew steady behind her. Caleb came near, his tall frame blocking some of the last blaze of daylight. He stopped by the fence, resting one hand on the rail, his eyes fixed on the view before them. Beautiful, he said softly. Every evening different, but tonight, there's something more. Amara gave a faint smile. Maybe because tonight, Dustville stopped speaking of me like a shadow. Tomorrow, it might start again. Caleb turned toward her, the gray blue of his eyes steady as stone. Amara, you were never a shadow, not once. Her gaze wavered, dark eyes heavy. But if I go to San Francisco, everything will be easier. I have kin there, a place to start again, without seeing the same faces that once measured me like stock to be sold. He drew in a breath, then stepped closer, until only a breath of air lingered between them. If that's what you want, I'll see you there myself, but his voice dipped rough and low. If there is even the smallest chance you might stay, I don't want to miss it. Amara froze. Stay for what? He did not look away. For me. For us. I love you, Amara. Not because you can handle numbers, not because you saved this ranch's accounts, but because you are you. The way you hold your head high, the way you will not break, even when a whole town tried to crush you. You made me believe Triple M is more than land. It's home, because you're in it. The wind carried the scent of hay and dust, and something warmer. Truth laid bare. Amara bowed her head, heart pounding hard. She had long feared promises, knowing how easily they broke. Yet Caleb's eyes that had watched her pain without turning away, shone now with a fire she could not deny. Caleb, her voice shook. You know how badly my trust was broken. I was made into a thing to be sold. I don't know if I can believe in love or in a home. He reached for her hand, slow and careful, never pressing. His rough fingers wrapped around her trembling ones. Then he bent, pressing a long, steady kiss to Tsoon, her knuckles, an oath not spoken but carved in the act itself. You are not a thing, he said against her skin, and you are not alone. If you stay, we build this home together. If you go, I'll still be yours, no matter how far. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks, but this time they did not carry shame or fear. They came from a heart that for the first time believed it was worthy of being loved, worthy of being chosen. She leaned, letting the gold of the sunset touch her face and whispered, Maybe I've been running long enough. Caleb's rare smile broke, lighting the rugged lines of his face. He tightened his hold, as though sealing the vow. They stood side by side, wrapped in the last blaze of prairie light, watching as night drew in. Darkness crept across the land, but in their hearts another light had kindled, steadier, brighter, and beyond any storm's reach. A year had passed since the sunset turned to gold beneath their promise. Time never stopped, yet at Triple M it seemed to move with a new rhythm, the rhythm of sowing, of rebuilding, of love quietly taking root. Fences stood straight, barns strong, the granary heavy with autumn's yield. The herd had doubled, cattle fat and steady under the sun. Hammer strikes, saws rasping, and laughter now carried across the valley like music. Dust Vale itself had changed. No longer did folks look at Amara with scorn. Instead, they sought her counsel, asking how to manage their ledgers, for all knew Triple M's prosperity rested in her hands as much as Caleb's. Amara was no longer shut away in the little office by herself. Ranch hands came and went with invoices, receipts, and accounts. They called her Miss Amara or simply one of ours. No man questioned why a black woman kept the books. They knew only that no one else could make the numbers run clean. Caleb remained the same, sparing with words, steady indeed. He spent his days in the fields and on the range, but every evening he returned, settling beside his wife under the porch roof to listen while she spoke of figures and plans. Not because he understood each detail, but because he wanted her to know. His presence was hers, whole and unwavering. That spring evening, the wind carried the scent of wildflowers through the boards of their new home. Amara stood on the porch, both hands resting over her belly, where life was quietly growing. Her dress stretched slightly, soft but proud. Her gaze lingered on the horizon where the sun was falling. Caleb stepped up, boots knocking low against the boards. He drew close and, without words, slid an arm around her waist, pressing a calloused hand against her belly. Warmth passed through his palm, and Amara's heart trembled. "Who do you think the child will take after?" she asked, voice faintly shy. He looked outward, then answered simply, "After you. Strong. Free." Amara smiled, tears bright in her eyes. In that moment, all the roads she had fled, all the eyes that once tried to break her, turned into nothing but distant shadows. What remained was this hand, this house, and the life yet to be born. Triple M had become more than land restored. It was proof of a truth as plain as it was powerful, that love asked no color, feared no prejudice, and bowed to no lie. The ranch hands who once held back now stood like brothers. They told travelers, "Miss Amara runs figures quicker than any man alive," or, "She's the reason this place still stands." Each morning when she stepped out to the porch, men tipped hats with respect. Each night by the fire, their talk was not of rumors or disdain, but of work done and songs half sung. Triple M had become a home, for more than just Caleb and Amara. One night, with the ranch gone quiet, Amara leaned against Caleb, listening to his heartbeat. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Regret what?" "Taking me down from that auction block, standing against Dustville for a woman like me." Caleb turned her face to his. "If I hadn't, I'd regret it every day until death. Amara, you're not a kind of woman. You're the only one." This time she didn't turn away from the tears. She let them fall and let him see, because they were no longer born of shame but of faith restored. That evening, as the sun sank and bathed the prairie in amber light, Amara whispered words so quiet only he could hear, but strong enough to last forever. "Here, I belong." Caleb's hand closed over hers, eyes glowing with quiet joy. They needed no further vow. The porch, the child stirring in her belly, the wide sky ablaze above them. These were proof enough. Some stories do not end in gunfire or grand displays. They end in a wooden porch, a steadfast embrace, and a whispered truth that echoes louder than thunder. So it was with Amara and Caleb at Triple M. From the dust of a public square where she was treated as less than human, Amara had risen to a place where she could lift her chin, smile, and speak 3 words she had never dared before. I belong. For many listening now, especially those whose hair has silvered and hands grown rough, this tale stirs memories of their own turns in life. Who among us has not been scorned? Who has not been left behind? Yet what matters is not the falls, but who stood beside us when we rose, and whose hand held ours to the end. At any age, the longing remains the same, to be seen, to be cherished as we truly are. Love, simple, steadfast love, is the strongest legacy we leave. It need not be carved in gold. It is carried in the eyes, in the quiet gestures, in the warmth that lingers long after words fade. When Amara whispered at sunset, "Here I belong," it was not only for Caleb. It was for all of us, those who listen, who remember our youth, or who sit side by side beneath a humble roof. Love is never too late. It is never too far gone to believe in, to begin again, to belong. If this story has stirred your heart, share with us, have you known a moment when you truly understood what it means to belong? Perhaps it was a hand held firm, a promise kept, or simply the gaze of someone who never looked away when life was hardest. If this story touched you, press like. And if you wish to keep walking with us through these Wild West love stories, quiet yet deep, click subscribe and the bell so you will not miss the next. Thank you, dear friends, especially those who have traveled more than half a lifetime, yet still choose to stay close to kindness and love. May each tale be a small lantern to warm your heart in the stillness of evening. We will meet again on the next trail, a different story, a different love, but carrying the same truth. The greatest legacy we can leave is the love we dared to give and the love we dared to receive.